Yo! Holy crap, holy crap!
Let's get started.
Stopping me.
How's everyone doing today? Today we're going to be installing Traxxas' new brushless system for the TRX4Ms. We're actually going to be installing it in the TRX4MT that we have on the bench today. It includes this super tiny brushless motor, our updated ECM, which allows you to retain the stock Traxxas transmitter, as well as our motor plate and screws. First things first, make sure your work area is clear, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the body. So here you have a good idea of what it looks like before. Go ahead and get our battery removed. We're going to go ahead and unplug everything from the stock ECM, and we're going to unclip the wires from the wire holder on the battery tray. And then we're going to remove the two 1.5 millimeter screws from the battery tray. Thankfully, pretty much every screw on this truck is 1.5 millimeter, and every screw that we are removing today will be using 1.5 millimeter. With our screws removed, go ahead and twist the battery tray so you can remove it from between the chassis rails, and you're going to unfeed the wires through the battery tray. Now that we've got those out, set your battery tray off to the side. Now that we have our battery tray off to the side, time to remove the transmission / motor assembly. To remove that, there's 4 screws, as you can see. With those 4 screws removed, our motor and transmission assembly now comes free. However, you can see we do have our motor wire zip tied to the servo wire, so we're just going to use a pair of dikes and cut that off. The last piece we need to remove is the drive shaft coupling. There's one on each side, so we're going to go ahead and remove the 1.5 millimeter screw holding on each drive shaft. With those screws removed, go ahead and pull off the drive shaft halves. And now we have 4 screws that are holding our transmission case together. We're going to go ahead and remove those. With those 4 screws removed, we're going to carefully lift off the transmission cover. We don't want all of our gears to fall out. If they do, we can always use an exploded diagram to figure it out. But I'm going to remove and place them in the order that I did remove them, so that when we put them back together, it's a little easier to figure out. The good thing is they'll pretty much only fit in one way. But with those gears out of the way, we do have two more 1.5 millimeter screws that are holding our motor to the transmission assembly. So go ahead and remove those. And take a look at this new motor. It is so small, it's crazy. And because of the shortness of the can, they actually include a adapter piece that installs with two screws that are provided. You'll notice two indented screw holes. Take note of the position of those screw holes in this image above. The brushless kit included 4 screws. I'm going to use the shorter of the 2 screws to screw into this adapter plate, connecting it to the motor. With the adapter piece installed to the brushless motor, I'm now installing the motor back onto the existing transmission plate or housing, and it's going to be using 2 screws that were provided with the brushless kit. So these are the 2 longer screws that were included with the brushless kit that I'm using to attach the motor to the transmission mount. Perfect. Now we've got our new brushless motor mounted to our stock transmission. It's an outrunner motor, which I love. It's absolutely beautiful to watch it work. Now we can go ahead and start dropping in our stock gears. Now I don't expect these plastic gears to last. We actually have a new acrylic clear Endura transmission with metal gears being delivered today, so this is just temporary. We'll have a video going over that new clear acrylic Endura transmission housing. Very excited to see that. And now that we have our gears back in, go ahead and mate that other half of the transmission housing. And we're going to reinstall the 4 1.5 millimeter screws. Now we have our transmission resecured. We're going to reattach the drive shaft couplings, half shafts, whatever you want to call them. We're just going to use the factory 1.5 millimeter screw. Make sure we get that nice and secure. And just like I don't expect the plastic gears to last, I do not expect these stock plastic drive shafts to last, which is why we have some metal Endura drive shafts also being delivered today. And we can see that everything is spinning smoothly and nothing's put back in correctly or torqued down too tightly. With our drive shafts back on the transmission assembly, it's time to drop the motor and transmission assembly back onto the chassis. Now we're going to go ahead and drop in our motor slash transmission assembly. I would recommend aligning up the front drive shaft first, as it's smaller, shorter, a little bit harder to get lined up. And once you manage to get that one lined up, you'll be able to switch to inserting the rear drive shaft, which has a little bit more room to work with. Gonna go ahead and do a free spin just to make sure that everything is spinning freely, no binding, anything like that. Everything looks good, so we can go ahead and take our 4 screws that were holding our transmission assembly in place and resecure those. Now that our transmission and motor assembly is secured, we can go ahead and reinsert our battery tray. And here I'm noticing the servo wire is actually a little close for comfort to the newly installed outrunner motor, which rotates on the outside. So to prevent any possible binding or wire frays, I'm going to go ahead and throw a zip tying the servo wire to the chassis rail. You'll just want to make sure that you reserve enough flex with the servo wire so that when the front suspension slash axle travels, there's enough room for the servo wire to move. Go ahead and feed your motor wire, servo wire. If you have any other wires, feed those through the battery tray as well before we install it back on the frame. And once we've pulled through enough slack, we're going to twist the battery tray in between the chassis rails. And you're going to want to make sure it's lined up so you can put your 2 screws into the existing screw holes. We're going to go ahead and work on getting these 2 screws tightened down, as well as finishing the wire routing through our battery tray. Next, we're going to be removing the 2 screws holding down the stock ECM. And just like that, we can remove the stock ECM. Make sure you retain those 2 screws, as we will use them to mount the new ECM, which is very similar size. It's just a lot thicker. And it now includes a couple extra ports for your accessories. Very nice to see. Go ahead and drop in the new ECM. Fits right into the factory spot. Traxxas does a really good job at making things plug and play, and this is definitely no exception. So we're just going to tighten down those 2 1.5 millimeter screws, securing our new ECM to the chassis. With our new ECM secure, go ahead and plug in our servo into channel 1, which is at the very front of the ECM, which is a good thing because we do not have a lot of leeway with wire here. Now our motor wire we can run over top and have it sticking out, or I actually decided to run mine underneath the chassis above the axle and around. Even with the rear suspension fully compressed, there's plenty of room for this wire. It's also out of the way of the spinning drive shaft. So I chose to go this way just for having a cleaner looking top view. And boom, there you have it. We now have a brushless Traxxas TRX4MT. Absolute beautiful setup. I feel like this is what the truck should have came with stock. The last step, binding the Traxxas transmitter. Hold the set button while you power on your factory radio. You should see a blinking red light. And then as you plug in the truck, hold the easy set button or set button. Oops, gotta flip our battery around so the battery can reach. And again, as we're holding in that set button on the ECM, go ahead and plug in your battery. And we'll see our ECM goes from red to green and our transmitter goes from red to green. And boom. You have successfully installed Traxxas' new brushless system into your Traxxas TRX4MT. Big increase in wheel speed. And I'll go ahead and show you a couple little running clips. Oh.
Yeah, it used to be you had to go in reverse to get it to wheelie. Rear wheelie. Oh.
Yeah. So hard to record 5 times.